In the meantime, Glenn Kimball picks up the story, the alternative view of Bible scholarship. Mainstream scholarship may not be here yet, but Glenn is filling in some very interesting blanks in the text. And he's saying that there's a reason why when Moses leaves with the children of Israel, leaves Egypt, that not all of the children of Israel go with Moses. It's where the other ones end up. It's the ramifications of leaving Ramses. Coming up on Coast to Coast Live, this is Ian Punnett. I don't know if we're rewriting the story of Joseph, but we're certainly adding in a lot of nuances and wrinkles that other scholars have been wrestling with for a long time. And depending on how you do the chronology of Joseph to Moses, it either makes more wrinkles or fewer wrinkles, but there's still wrinkles. Bottom line is, at some point, Moses, talks to the burning bush, and the burning bush says go, and bring Aaron to be your spokesperson, and there are all sorts of miracles that are performed, and Moses leaves with the children of Israel. Is that we're good with that part of the story then, Glenn Kimball?
Sure we are.
Okay.
That's not all the story, but that's certainly a good part of it.
All right, so then Moses goes. Now, does Moses take all of the Israelites with him?
He did not. When Moses begged to have the children of Israel go, he was not only begging to have Pharaoh free the people, but he was really begging to have the artisans and the craftsmen and the builders that were an integral part of the infrastructure of Egypt. That he's begging to have them released from their duties and to leave, and he was begging to have the artifacts of the temple at Tel Armana to leave with him, namely the Ark of the Covenant and the other temple artifacts. He was telling Pharaoh, we're going to take the whole kit and caboodle with us, and we need to have you let us go.
Now, if there was a problem with the pharaohs that had taken over and that they wanted to eliminate the Joseph line of pharaohs, why wouldn't they have just right away said, oh, yeah, please go, get out of here?
Because it involved taking their builders, their artisans, the people that were building their cities. It involved taking an enormous cache of gold, temple artifacts. You know, in Carthage, for example, there's still a stele to this day that said that when the temples were abandoned, and this is at the time of Horemheb, that a great darkness appeared over in the Egyptian culture. So we're talking about the abandoning of what temple? Was it the temple at Karnak? No, because that was still in operation. The temples in Luxor? No, they were still in operation. The only temple that was abandoned at that moment in time was the temple at Tel Armana, which housed the Ark of the Covenant.
And that was roughly, is that the Valley of the Kings?
No, the Valley of the Kings is on the same side of the Nile River. The Valley of the Kings is a good hour and a half by car, but it's not very far from there.
All right, just want to make sure I was trying to get a mental picture. Okay, so they take off with then the artisans, the builders, they go. Now, if they don't all go with Moses, where do the other ones go, and who takes them?
Well, Gathalis, remember now, has married. He was given the daughter of Pharaoh, who was a queen of the tribe of Joseph. Gathalis goes back to where his forefathers. He puts all the people that belong to his military, his wife, his family, all of the people that belong to his militia. He sails back to Greece where he came from. And by the way, they take with them some important things. We know from the segment that the History Channel did on the Exodus Decoded that in Mycenae, Greece, to this very day, is a entire museum filled with gold from the Exodus. That's Egyptian gold. They have military arms. They have the swords of Israel in those museums. They have temple medallions depicting the Ark of the Covenant where it stood in the Temple of Armana. They have maps of how they left Egypt. They have reliefs and paintings showing Moses crossing the Red Sea and having Pharaoh drown in the ocean. Why is all of this in these first-hand artifacts in Greece? How did they get to Greece?
Could it not be like anything else that years later they would be captured, they would be found, they would be taken over by, Greek warriors, military leaders who go out and plunder the countryside and then take it all back to Greece? Why not that?
That could be true, but these were tombs that were only excavated in our day, and so that they've been hidden for an awfully long time.
Okay.
So
all right, well,
we're talking about them being untouched for a very, very, very long time.
Well, I mean, but ancient Greece was a very, very long time ago too. So,
and then we have some additional circumstantial evidence here that'll help us as well.
All right, so Gathaeus here again, he was a contemporary of Moses. He was a general alongside of Moses, and he took some of the Jews with him, and then other people that would have been in his military or other people that were just closely related to him. So Moses goes in one direction.
He probably didn't take any Jews at all. He probably only took people from the Danite tribe and from the Josephite tribe and maybe a few others, we don't know. But the bulk of the Jews themselves, the tribe of Judah, left with Moses into the deserts of Sinai.
Okay, so they leave with Moses into the desert. Now, does Moses bring the Ark of the Covenant with him?
Yes, he does. And Gathaeus takes with him a different artifact.
What does he take with him?
He takes with him the Pillar of Jacob. Now, the Pillar of Jacob, as you well know, came from Bethel. It was brought by Jacob. It was the stone upon which he dreamt the dream where his sons would be kings. And it was a temple stone. It was a stone of destiny. They call it the Pillar of Destiny. This was the pillar that was destined to be the seat where the kings of the earth would be crowned king. And so Gathaeus takes this stone, he takes it with him to Greece, and then on to Spain, where he has a conflict with the Spaniards.
All right, now hold on. Now stop right here. So Gathaeus is not content to stay in Greece, although it is essentially his homeland, right? I mean, or is the homeland
He wasn't content to stay there the first time either. With his father and him didn't get along very well.
Okay, so Gathaeus, does he take with him more of his people too, and then they head on to Spain, or just Gathaeus and his immediate, family? He
takes largely the group of people that he took out of Egypt. They largely go with him.
Okay,
that included his militia that were conscript soldiers that fought in the Ethiopian wars. He takes a portion of the tribe of Dan, and probably 3 or 4 intermarried couples that had bloodlines from the other 12 tribes.
Why does he go all the way to Spain? Why not stop in, say, Italy, or stop in, farther before you get all the way to Spain? That's a long way.
He had a vision that his destiny would be in the Emerald Isle.
The Emerald Isle of Ireland?
He didn't know where it was. He's following a path looking for this fabled Emerald Isle. And he stops in Spain, and by the way, here's Gathaeus with all of his militia, his trained mercenaries. They land in Spain. The Spaniards think that he's coming to conquer the land, when in reality he's looking for a place of solace and peace. And they fight with him, and Gathaeus wins. Now, Gathaeus then turns to him and says, all right, we want to live in peace. We don't want to fight anymore. And so the Spaniards give him a land which is called after Gathaeus' name. It's called the Port of Gathaeus, or the Portugal.
Portugal comes from Port of Gathaeus.
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's pretty freaky. Is that true?
That's exactly right.
All right, if you ask the average Portuguese person where does the name Portugal comes from, what will they say?
They will tell you that it's the father of Hibernius.
Okay.
And Hibernius was the son of Gathaeus.
Okay. So he goes all the way there, and then they're going there to live peaceably, and he's going to live in Spain. Why doesn't the story end right there? I mean, they're naming the Port of Gathaeus after him. And
the Spaniards regretted having given him the Portugal country, and so they started another war, and Gathaeus wins again. But by this time, Gathaeus gets the point. these people are never going to stop fighting us. So we're going to follow this rumor that we have that the Emerald Isle is not very far off. He sends the tribe of Dan to part of these people that were part of the mariners onto a place called, which was the Emerald Isle, which was Ireland. Okay, Ireland receives these people with open arms because there's not very many people there, first of all, and they receive them in peace. That's why Ireland, to this very day, is still called Hibernia, after Gathalus's son.
Okay, so the Hibernian Peninsula, isn't that what they call the area south of Spain? Isn't that Iberian Peninsula? Is that what they say?
Iberia is Spain, Hibernia is Ireland.
Okay, but that's what those two words are connected in that way.
Absolutely, they're connected in that very same way.
Because I remember that from the book, How the Irish Saved Civilization. I just don't remember it coming from Gathalus, and then all the way back to Egypt. I mean, because now we're talking about, I mean, if it's Gathalus, aren't we still talking about what, 1200 BCE? Aren't we talking about that? Aren't we talking about?
We're talking about before the fall of Troy. Yes, we are.
Okay, so even before the fall of Troy. So this is so ancient, and so you're telling me that that Portugal has that name, Portugal, going all the way back. To before Christ. It was called, that area was called Portugal because of Gathalus.
Over 1,000 years before Christ. Yes.
Okay. All right. And so right about that, how long did they last in Portugal? Only would have been a couple. If it was Gathalus's son Hibernia, then it would have been 30 years that they stayed in Portugal? A generation. So 50 years, 60 years. And then they take off for Ireland, and they settle in there in what year, roughly?
Well, once again, you're talking about those years are still being debated, but we're talking about roughly 1200, 1100, 1200 BC.
Okay, so somewhere between right around 12 centuries BC. Yeah. So right around in there. And what do they still have with them from Egypt?
They still have the Stone of Destiny, or the Pillar of Jacob, or the Coronation Stone, which is this great stone that belonged, or probably did exist at one point in time, in the Temple at Amarna in Egypt, and was taken with Gathalus to the west instead of with Moses to the east. And that stone, once again now, doesn't remain in Ireland. Because what happened to the people who came into Ireland? Part of them stayed there, but the majority of them emigrated to a land that was given the name of Gathalus's wife. Now, what was her name?
I don't know.
Scota, or Scotland.
All right. I want to make sure I'm following you. So, at this point, do they have how many people of the original journey might still be left with them when they've made it to Ireland?
By the time they made it to Ireland, Gathalus is already dead. Just barely, though.
Okay, so he's just barely dead. But how many do we have? 2 dozen, 3 dozen, 2 shiploads? How many people?
An armada full.
An armada full of people that come from what would have been Portugal to Ireland. How many people then make the trip from Ireland to this new land that would be named after Hibernia's wife?
No, Scota.
Oh, Gathalus's wife, Scota.
Yeah.
All right, how many people make the trip then from Ireland to what would become Scotland?
On the 700 isles of the Emerald Isles, an armada is spread out through all of them.
Okay.
And by the way, the Isle of Ionia, which is, to this very day thought of as a Greek isle where the largest library in the world once stood, is the isle where the Book of Kells is still found today. These people populated all of those islands and went to northern England.
All right, these people meaning the other group of people that escaped from underneath the Pharaoh. While Joseph went east, they went essentially north and then west, and they take off for Spain, then Ireland, then Scotland, And they are the people who begin to begin to inhabit Scotland?
That's correct. And by the way, the first Irish kings are all crowned on a stone, which was the Pillar of Jacob. And by the way, the kings of Scotland too are crowned on this stone chair as well. They call it a chair. It's not really doesn't look like a chair. It's a stone.
It's a pillar.
It's a pillar. It's a pillar.
Right. So do they refer to it as Jacob's pillar?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Gets weirder and weirder. All right, now, do they have any artifacts with them that they carry all the way? Because I know at one point you mentioned all the artifacts that were in Greece that still had, what did they have? Did you say they had the Ark of the Covenant stamped on them?
Many of those priestly medallions were buried with people who died while they were still in Greece.
Okay.
But they did take some artifacts with them. We still have swords after the fashion of the swords that were in Egypt that make it all the way into Ireland and Great Britain. We still have some of those swords in Spain. We still have remnants of the wealth of the family of Gathelus. For heaven's sakes, ancient Gaul was named after Gathelus. Gaelic is named after Gathelus. Gathelus is one of the most famous root entities in all of Western Europe.
Okay.
And his wife was Scota, who was a queen from the tribe of Joseph. And from her posterity are crowned the kings of England, the kings of Ireland, even to the crown to this very day.
So out of Scota, or out of this, the wife of Gathelus, who had a heritage that goes back to Joseph, which wasn't that many generations before her, right? Because that would have been,
that's correct.
If it's Gathelus, it would have been her maybe great-great-grandfather or something, right? I mean, not that far back.
Not that far back.
Okay, so she becomes, who are her offspring that become kings of Ireland, kings of Scotland, and kings of England?
The royal crowns of early Ireland and the first kings of Scotland.
Okay, and they came from her. Why did they recognize her? If the people were already there in Ireland before Gathelus showed up, and he hadn't been there that long, why would they recognize her as being the person that would produce the royal bloodline?
She was considered a queen of Egypt and considered a royal bloodline, of which they had none at that time in the Emerald Isles.
Okay, they didn't have any in Ireland. So they accepted the Queen of Egypt. Why would they have known about Egypt?
Egypt was a famous story. Egypt was a merchant country that traded all the way out to the Gates of Hercules, all the way around the known world at that time.
Okay,
what happened? The events that happened at the Exodus were well known all the way through India, all the way into the Far East. Only in our day do we limit the availability of knowledge. At the time of one of the
news traveled fast is what you're saying here. Well, okay, we'll go into the break. We'll talk about this when we come back, because you're just getting to the fact that you believe the mother of Mary, that would be the grandmother of Jesus, was born in ancient Britain?
That's correct, and a descendant of these great people that came from the Exodus.
All right. Tying this all up, before we let you get in on it with your questions and comments coming up next hour, we'll talk about this, how to tie in Jesus and the prophet Jeremiah to Ireland and Scotland, too, next on Coast to Coast Live. This is Ian Punnett. One of the best Bond themes of all time, Carly Simon. And from The Spy Who Loved Me. Still got a couple more to go. Celebrating the release of the new Bond film this weekend. I hear it's just racking up huge numbers at the box office, both domestically in England, internationally. It's just going to be one of the biggest Bond films of all time. And it deserves it, too. It's way fun. Casino Royale. And I think you'll like the way they've gone with this Bond story. It's kind of starting from the very beginning. It's not a prequel. I mean, this isn't, you can't really put this before the Sean Connery movies. It's like almost like they're going to start the franchise all over again with this film. And Not a bad idea. Well, anyway, Glenn Kimball's not a Bond scholar. I just can't help but play the music. But as a biblical scholar, Glenn Kimball has been working on these ancient manuscripts for a long time, starting at a very early age when he started collecting them. B.A. in journalism, a master's in communication, did everything toward his Ph.D. in communications, passed his doctoral exams, but never finished his dissertation. And I bet you it drove his mother crazy. Anyway, Glenn has taught school. He's helped us found schools, and now he has founded the Kimball College of Biblical Knowledge. And you can find out more about them by linking up online through coasttocoastam.com. We're just getting to I can't even say the final chapter, but the part where things, if you've been amazed so far, buckle in, because it's just about to really take off. How it is that the Mary of the Jesus story actually relates back to the Exodus story through Britain, and this might really explain a lot of things, even perhaps why in the biblical story of Jesus, Mary and Joseph seek refuge in Egypt. Could it be that she was just returning kind of back to the old family homestead via Scotland? Next on Coast to Coast Live, this is Ian Punnett. Okay, so let's go through it from the top real quick. Abraham and Sarah were promised by God that he would be the father of many nations and that Sarah would be the mother of many kings, right?
Correct.
Okay, and Glenn Kimball says, then Sarah has the son Isaac, right?
Right.
And Isaac begat
Jacob.
All right, and Jacob begat
12 sons, the birthright son being Joseph.
And Joseph being the birthright son because he was the first son of the desired wife being Rachel.
Yep.
Sorry. And so the firstborn son of the more desired wife, the one that had been barren, so it sort of follows again the Sarah story. But Joseph is thrown into a pit, and Jacob is convinced that he's killed by the other brothers, and Joseph goes off into Egypt, becomes very famous, very powerful. Within a few generations after, then Joseph's daughter marries a prince that would become a pharaoh, right?
Right.
Okay, that pharaoh has other pharaohs in the pharaonic line. But those become unpopular pharaohs when another pharaonic line takes over in Egypt. Is that correct?
That's correct, because they were trying to change the religions of Egypt, and they wanted, by the time of Horemheb, they wanted to change them back.
They want to get rid of the monotheism that had influenced the royalty of Egypt.
Right.
Return back to the many gods of the original Egyptian theocracy.
Right.
So then the Jews fall out of favor. They go to Moses takes most of them and goes east, wanders through the desert for 40 years, takes with him the Ark of the Covenant. But there's another group that goes with Gathalis, who was a contemporary of Moses, who was married to a daughter in the Josephus pharaonic line, right?
Right.
Okay, and so goes up in that line, and they go first to Greece, then they go to Spain, then they go to Ireland. In the transition from Spain to Ireland, Gathalis is ancient, begins to die. His son Hibernia takes over, takes mom with him to Ireland. That's why we still call the members of Ireland Hibernians, or there is just a Hibernian society just down the street from my house. People from Ireland are associated with the House of Hibernia. and then Scotland is named in honor of the late Gathalus's wife, Scota, and that she becomes sort of the head of the new bloodline, in effect fulfilling the promise to Sarah that she would be the mother of many kings.
That's correct.
Whew. Man, okay. So
and
now,
by the way, there's a lot more to the story, and you're going to have to take the class at Kimball College to get the details.
Okay. Can I get a doctorate yet at Kimball College? Can I get a PhD yet?
Well, we've been approached by several people seeking accreditation, wanting to be associated with it, and that'll probably be happening one of these days, too.
Okay. Well, I'm all for it, by the way. I mean, I'm teasing about it, but I think it's very cool. So, and I think the Kimball College of Biblical Knowledge has a nice ring to it, you know. So, and what would be your slogan? Do you have it in Latin yet? Do you have like a creed yet for Kimball College?
I survived.
I survived.
You know, the biblical story is just a very, very shallow framework of what really happened.
Okay, but don't jump ahead there, because I think you could steal Faber College, you know, to say knowledge is good. You could just say biblical knowledge is good, and that could be your motto there for the college. So then here you have. So then this brings us back somehow though to Jesus, because you're saying that the birthright, the early bloodline, the royal bloodline coming out of the bloodline of Egypt into England and into Scotland and into Ireland, and that somewhere along the line here, this becomes the bloodline of Jesus?
Well, first of all, Jesus is the heir apparent of the house of Judah, or the house of David, but he also has the bloodline of Joseph from his ancestors who intermarried with the royal houses of Scota. And by the way, by the time of Jeremiah the prophet in 6th century BC, Jeremiah, Daniel, and Ezekiel tell Jerusalem, if you don't repent, you're going to be destroyed. Jeremiah has the Ark of the Covenant in tow. He has to get out of town because the Babylonians are coming over the hill. We're being flippant here. Where does he go first with the Ark of the Covenant? What does the Bible tell us? He goes back to Egypt. He takes it back to the ruins of the Temple of Amarna. You have to ask yourself, why would he do such a silly thing?
Yeah, why would he do that?
Because it was originally there. That's where it originally had been located. Okay. When he got back there, the priests of Amun had totally desecrated the temple, destroyed it. He leaves a replica with the Ethiopians, which Graham Hancock talks about today.
Right. And he has he actually seen it, the replica?
No.
Okay, and nobody has actually seen it. We just think that the Ethiopians have one. Okay.
It's called a talbot, and there are over 100 talbots in the world which are supposedly substitutions for the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
Various degrees of artisan quality. But now Jeremiah doesn't stay in Egypt. Where does he go? Where is his tomb today? Well, Jeremiah's tomb is in Ireland.
Now, how do we know that?
Well, it's on the tourist map there. You take a little tour.
Okay, I don't care if it's on the tourist map. How do we know it? How do we know that that's what that's?
I don't have his fingerprints, and I can't compare them against those who were found.
I'm not asking for DNA proof, but I mean, like, where? I mean, is there any other ancient manuscript that makes reference to
the records of Odlam Fadla still exist from Great Britain. These are the records that Jeremiah came to came to Ireland and died there. And I didn't write them. They are records that exist in Great Britain today. And by the way, that if you want to get a copy of that, there's a book at Ancient Manuscript or at the Kimball College called Irish Prince, Hebrew Prophet. That'll give you all the details of Jeremiah going to Ireland.
Okay, so he takes the Ark of the Covenant with him to Ireland.
And he also takes with him Tetefi, who's the only surviving heir of King Zedekiah from the Babylonian conquest. Remember, Zedekiah and his two sons are killed. The only heir to the Jewish throne is his daughter Tetefi. She goes with Jeremiah to Ireland. And so now we're confused because now we have the bloodline of Joseph and the bloodline of the Jews in Ireland. And they get mixed up back and forth because many people think that it was Jeremiah that took the Pillar of Jacob to Ireland to begin with, when that's not correct. The Pillar of Jacob had been there. The kings of ancient Ireland had been crowned on the Pillar of Jacob long before Jeremiah came there in the 6th century BC.
Okay, so Jeremiah gets buried in Ireland. What happens to the Ark of the Covenant?
That's a whole new story. We got 10 minutes to go before we get questions.
I don't care.
We'll do that on the show, but I can tell you.
Give me 2-minute version of what happens to the Ark of the Covenant in Ireland.
Well, the Ark of the Covenant still is not in Ireland. Moses had a dream where the Ark of the Covenant would be laid. It would be laid at the feet of Mount Nebo in the valley of the crossroads of the Red, White, and Blue River and the valley of the Blue Shroud. We have to locate that. By the way, that's not in the Middle East. It's not in Jerusalem. It's not in Ireland.
You're going to tell me it's in the United States.
Huh?
You're going to tell me it's in the United States.
I'll tell you where it is. It's at the place where Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden in the valley of the Cave of the Treasures.
It's in Iraq.
I'm going to leave it for another story.
Okay, no, no, come on.
You're trying to be naughty to me here.
I know you're telling me that the Ark of the Covenant was taken from Ireland and ends up. Where do we have? What's the next step that you have in any ancient manuscript of where it goes next? If you won't tell me where it ends up.
Well, there's a whole tribe of people who call themselves the people of the Ark. They call themselves the Ark Nation. They have in their records and in their paintings a replica of themselves carrying this Ark of the Covenant to its resting place.
Okay,
the
I
Ark
don't know.
Nation.
The Ark Nation, Arkansas. It's in Arkansas. Is what you're telling me.
I'm telling you that you look at the map. you
Ark
little
Nation.
rat finger.
Ark Nation.
You're trying to escape having to do another show.
I'm not trying to escape doing a show with you. When have I ever escaped doing a show with you? When have I ever? Okay.
No, but you're right.
I also don't like to. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Jeremiah had a vision on his way to Ireland that he was to turn to the left, and the rest of the armada that was with him was to turn to the right, and he was gone for 2 years.
Ark Nation.
And by the way, he went to a place that had been well-trafficked and well-traveled. It's part of a class we're doing this month on the Michigan tablets. We have artifacts out the yin-yang that are disseminated up the Mississippi all the way up into Michigan, where at the time of the Bronze Age, they were mining copper in Michigan. We still have the mines there. We still have the artifacts. We still have the writings. We still have all of the historical evidence of the fact that this was a well-trafficked route. That's where Jeremiah took it, only he got as far as where God told him to take it to the feet of Mount Nebo.
Let me guess. Nova Scotia. If Scotia was named, if Scota was the name of Gathalus's wife, and that's where Scotland comes from, that's where it ended up, was in New Scotland in Nova Scotia.
No, you go to the Arkansas National Forest and see what you find prominently, one of the peaks there. What is it called?
So I was right when I said Arkansas.
It's Mount Nebo. And it's in the crossroads of 3 rivers. And it's in the valley that was anciently called the Valley of the Blue Shroud.
And you're saying I was just joking when I said Arkansas. I was just trying to think of something with Ark in it. Okay, well, this is getting. I want to know. We'll do more on that when you teach your class, and we'll have you back. All right. So now we haven't gotten to the Jesus part where somehow then the family line that leads to Anna, the mother of Mary, comes from Britain.
The royal family that was there when Jeremiah got there was the family of Joseph through Scota and Gathalus. They married in with Tetefi.
And Tetefi, who had been taken with Jeremiah to Ireland, then becomes sort of a further validation of the divine right of kings.
That's correct.
All right. And
so in other words, Jesus gets his right to be who he was, not only as the heir apparent to the house of David, but as the heir apparent to the birthright son of Joseph as well.
So all right.
And that's why Joseph of Arimathea took the Virgin Mary, Mary Magdalene, Lazarus, Cassius Longinus, a whole boat of people in the Exodus of the Faithful in 36 A.D., goes back to Marseille, France, where, by the way, is a city that was founded by a man called Gathalas, and they go back there and they move on to Great Britain, where Brittany is the homeland of St. Anna. She was one of the royal family members there. She reverse immigrated back to Jerusalem to marry a Jew, marry a member of her family, and Jesus travels back to Great Britain a couple of times during his life, and that history is a story for another show as well. But it's part of the reason why part of the Holy Land that we're talking about, Little Jerusalem, is still located in Great Britain to this day.
Okay, and that's interesting because there are stories. They are obviously non-canonical stories, but there are extra-biblical accounts of Jesus traveling with Joseph of Arimathea to England because he was a copper trader. Is that what it was? Or
actually, it was tin and lead.
Tin and lead. Okay, so he was going there for tin and lead, and that he would have brought his nephew with him. He would have been Mary's brother, right?
It was Mary's uncle.
Mary's uncle. Okay.
Yes.
And that's how so it would have been the great uncle of Jesus.
That's correct. And by the time Joseph the carpenter had died, the next in line to take care of the Virgin Mary was her great uncle, the extremely wealthy Joseph of Arimathea, who was probably the third wealthiest man on the planet at that moment in time. That's how Jesus, that's why when you read the gospel called the Gospel of the Virgin Mary, you find out that her family is extremely well-to-do and were famous for their philanthropy. They gave a third of their increase to the poor and needy every year, and that's why they were being followed by 5,000 people in the hills of Galilee, because they fed them.
Okay, and this is what other coincidences, what other words then come into this story that leads us to validate that Anna, then Mary, and Joseph of Arimathea all tie back into the little holy land of England?
You obviously have something on your mind, Edith.
Well, no, because I thought that there's usually like something else that comes along. Are there other names that come up? Are there other that relate to Gathalas or do we ever see any Hebrew that starts showing up in that area or other references?
Yes, we do. We see both not only geographical names of cities and names of places and names of cultures and people. Gaelic, the ancient Celtics. Where do Celtics come from? Where does that come? How does that tie in? The Celtics intermarried with the tribes of Israel, came over through the Po Valley, through Italy, and down into to Britain. Britain is the word Brit is not a English word; it's a Hebrew word meaning covenant. When you call people British, you're calling them the people of the covenant. Okay. British are the people of the covenant, and the Saxons were the people of the sons of Jacob. That's what Saxon means.
All right, now, where are the bones of Joseph? The Joseph of the hold on. I guess we're out of time. I just wanted to wrap up because I had one question here I thought was interesting. I'll get to that. But we'll just hold on to all these thoughts. Make sure we've got them all answered, and then we'll start taking your questions, too. We're going to give you all the numbers you need to join in this conversation as we talked about how this sort of almost like in a circular fashion from Israel down to Egypt, then up through Greece, then over to Britain, then back down to the Holy Land, and then back up again to England goes the story of the Exodus. Not the Exodus story of Moses, but the other Exodus, the one that happened at the same time, but in a different direction. We're talking about it with Joseph scholar Glenn Kimball on Coast to Coast Live. Your call's next. This is Ian Punnett.